The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and welcome to this webinar, Hearing Health for Musicians, delivered by the ISM Trust. I'm Vincent Howard, the co-founder and Director of Audiology at leading ear care clinic Hearology. Just like to say thank you to the entire ISM team for organising this webinar, and thank you to my team at Hearology for helping with the preparations for this presentation. I hope everyone finds this interesting, but most of all, useful. So before we begin, a few technical points. You can't see us, but you should be able to see the PowerPoint presentation displayed on the screen. You should also be able to hear me, but I can't hear you. If you experience any technical difficulties, such as sound quality issues, please let us know in the question box and we'll make some attempts to resolve the issue. If you have any questions for me related to the webinar subject, please type them in the question box and we'll answer as many as possible at the end of the presentation. This webinar is being recorded and will be available to view on the ISM's website at ism.org/webinars. Okay, musicians and hearing. Playing and enjoying music better and for longer. Just quickly go through the agenda. I'm going to talk about the ear, the most valuable musical instrument, music and auditory disorders, a few facts and figures, looking at existing prevention strategies and solutions, the musician's hearing conservation program, and tips on ear health longevity. So, how many of you have had an eye test at an optician or gone to a dentist to get your teeth checked? It's something that we do annually, even more regular than that. We regularly check blood pressure, heart rate, track the steps, movements. There's apps on our phones, there's Fitbits, there's things that are there to monitor the human body. But what about our ears? Something that is so vital to us and we have no control over. The moment we're born, or the moment we're conceived to the end of our days, the ear is working, it's on, even when we're sleeping. You can shut your eyes to not see, but you can't turn your ears off. So there's more to the ear than meets the eye. It's complex, it's minute, it's something that is always on and always allows you to enjoy life, even stand up straight in the morning because it has the balance system inside. So we just made a little illustration. It's a little bit easier to digest than a Latin picture or drawing. So the ear is a magnificent and beautiful structure, and we only really see the miraculous cartilaginous appendages which are positioned on each side of our head. And even then, we don't look at them in detail. I've got a video coming up which will just explain how we hear, but essentially the ear has a process to capture sound vibrations that travel through the air, goes through the eardrum, gets amplified down the ossicles, the little bones, into the cochlea, and depending on the type of frequencies it's receiving is what it sends to the brain for decoding. Something that we really take for granted is ear health, and a part of that is having to make sure that the wax in our ear is at a sustainable level, maintained properly. Earwax has brilliant properties, it's very friendly to the body. It will regulate and maintain pH level, it traps dirt and dust, it repels water, and is actually an insect repellent. As you can imagine, your ear cavity is a warm, moist, dark environment, so bacteria can grow. So the first point is to keep your ears healthy and make sure there is minimal or just the right amount of wax in the ear. And because you can't look in your own ears, you must get someone to look in there for you. So we're going to learn now about how the ear works. It's a fantastic video. Enjoy.
The sense of hearing is accomplished by a process known as auditory transduction. The ear converts sound waves in the air into electrical impulses, which can be interpreted by the brain. As sound enters the ear, it passes through the external auditory canal, where it meets the tympanic membrane. The tympanic membrane then vibrates in response to the sound. Sounds of a lower pitch, or frequency, produce a slower rate of vibration, and sounds of lower volume, or amplitude, produce a less dramatic vibration. Higher frequency sounds produce faster vibrations. The tympanic membrane is cone-shaped and articulates with a chain of 3 bones called the auditory ossicles. They consist of the malleus, the incus, and the stapes. The movements of the tympanic membrane vibrate the ossicles, passing on the information of frequency and amplitude. The stapes moves with a piston-like action, which sends vibrations into a structure called the bony labyrinth. The labyrinth is filled with a fluid called perilymph. If it were a completely closed and inflexible system, the movement of the stapes would be unable to displace the perilymph, and therefore unable to send vibrations into the bony structure. Due to the flexibility of a membrane called the round window, the stapes movement can displace the perilymph, allowing vibrations to enter the labyrinth. The corridor leading to the round window is found within the spiral portion of the bony labyrinth, known as the cochlea. Vibrations produced by the stapes are drawn into the spiral system and return to meet the round window. The portion of the spiral passage in which vibrations ascend to the apex of the cochlea is called the scala vestibuli. The descending portion of the passage is called the scala tympani. A third structure, called the cochlear duct, is situated between the scala vestibuli and the scala tympani. The cochlear duct is filled with a fluid called endolymph, and when viewed in cross-section, the membranes separating the 2 fluid-filled systems are visible. They are Reissner's membrane and the basilar membrane. The membranes are flexible and move in response to the vibrations traveling up the scala vestibuli. The movements of the membranes then send vibrations back down to the scala tympani. A specialized structure called the organ of Corti is situated on the basilar membrane. As the basilar membrane vibrates, the organ of Corti is stimulated, which sends nerve impulses to the brain via the cochlear nerve. The actual nerve impulses are generated by specialized cells within the organ of Corti called hair cells. The hair cells are closely covered by a structure called the tectorial membrane. As the basilar membrane vibrates, the tiny clusters of hairs are bent against the tectorial membrane, triggering the hair cells to fire. The entire basilar membrane does not vibrate simultaneously. Instead, specific areas along the basilar membrane move variably in response to different frequencies of sound. Lower frequencies vibrate the basilar membrane closer to the apex of the cochlea, whereas higher frequencies produce vibrations closer to the base. This arrangement is known as tonotopic organization. Together, this sequence of events is responsible for our acoustic perception of the world around us.
fantastic video that is, and a true miracle of nature. It actually is so automatic. We have no control over it. There's no on and off switch. And what we can see now is how the cochlea is formed. It's like a curled up piano. At one end you have the lower pitch right in the middle, and at the beginning you have the higher pitch regions. Tonotopic organization is almost like a freak of nature. It's fantastic. It happens in both ears simultaneously, and it gives us the ability to process multiple frequencies simultaneously in both ears. Not only does that give us an awareness of what's around us, but it will continue to give us the directionality of sound. So, music and noise-induced auditory disorders. Probably the greatest fear of many of you listening and watching this presentation. What is the difference between music and noise? Well, actually, it's all sound, and it all has the same impact on our ears. It's just about how much are you exposed to, and for the period of time you're exposed to it. So the ears will get affected whether you're listening to music or you're hearing traffic noise. So these are just some title headings that we're going to go into a little bit more detail. We've got on the left-hand side, we've got some of the factors affecting musically induced auditory disorders, the legislation talking about temporary and permanent threshold shifts, and then we've got 6 quite severe issues that can arise from listening and hearing music, noise, or any type of sound. So, with sound, with noise, with music, it's actually the duration and the intensity. So if you're listening to something extremely loud, but only for a short period, it has a different impact to when you're listening to something very loud over a long period of time. Other things that can affect our ears can be genetic, environmental sounds, even chemicals, solvents. There's a few medical issues, ototoxic drugs, recreational and prescriptive, and also other issues like cardiovascular and diabetes. It's an accumulation of things that can affect our ears. On top of that is the sound that you're exposed to. So this is a very important topic and something I think everyone is aware of, the Royal Opera House noise-induced hearing loss claim that happened. So we've got to take the health and safety very seriously of ears, especially if you're an employee in a music organisation or event space, or if you're the employer. We have to understand the risks and look after and safeguard the well-being of the musicians and the people under your control or employment. So it actually applies to all musicians, including self-employed freelancers. The noise at work regulations, the HSE implemented in 2005, they came into act the following year in 2009, and actually that gave the musical world 2 years grace to get prepared, because it's a little bit more difficult in the music arenas than it is to, say, an airport or a factory, where things are pretty standard. The musical world can vary, the venue size can vary, and it's difficult to regulate and monitor that. However, any sounds that are 80 decibels or above, people need to understand the risks. They need to make hearing protection available and also inform, train, educate anyone that is in their supervision at that time to understand the effects of sound. We don't need to, shock and awe people. It's just educating on the medical implications that sound can give us. When sound levels become 85 dB or above, then we have to take things a little bit more seriously. We have to understand the amount of sound at different parts in the arena or in the venue, and understand the accumulation of lots of instruments together that can actually make the sound a little bit more intense. So more effort has to be put in place to make sure you're protecting the welfare of people's ears. So if the upper exposure level breaches the 85 dB, then personal hearing protection actually needs to be enforced, educated on how to use it, and also to limit outside external factors that affect your exposure daily levels. If anything exposure-wise exceeds 87 on average in a day, that's it. Your dose has been taken for that particular day, so you must sort of activate the noise dieting strategies, which we will talk about a little bit later. If there is any part in the day where sound pressure level or decibel levels peaks to a certain point that takes you over the threshold, then it's important to be aware of the risks if you continue to play. So just take a few seconds for you to just read this slide. And I'm going to reiterate, employees in any music organisation should be covered and looked after by the employer. If you're freelancers, self-employed, and students, please be aware that you've got to take it upon yourself to protect yourself. And this is the first stage, attending a presentation like this, just to be informed. You need informed choices, and protecting your ears can be as simple as protecting your eyes with sunglasses, but we're going to go on how we protect the ears in a minute. Okay, temporary and permanent threshold shifts. The hearing threshold should be as close to 0 as possible. However, there is a variation from person to person. It might be the natural hearing ability of one ear compared to the other ear, or male compared to female, or someone who actually has a bigger ear canal to a person who has a smaller ear canal. Temporary and permanent threshold shifts, it can be scary. I've experienced one. I'm sure many people coming out of a nightclub or a gig or a very loud restaurant have experienced a dullness of sound, dullness of frequency, usually accompanied by a ringing in the ears. So this is really a headline fact here. The World Health Organization actually says that noise-induced hearing loss is the most common, permanent and preventable occupational injury in the world. I mean, it has no visible scars. You can't see the trauma. There's no pain. It generally is unnoticeable in the beginning of your career, but accumulates over a period of time, and the knock-on effects will come into play sort of midlife. It is 100% permanent, however, 100% preventable. Okay, so we've tried to arrange the decibel scale so people can understand it. It can be quite complex, so we've simplified the version. So on the left-hand side, we've got the faint sounds, and all the way on the other side, as the little circles get bigger, we have the painful sounds. Conversation around 60, shouting can be around 70, vacuum cleaner going up to most orchestras 90-ish, maybe even 100 in some pieces. You start going over 100 decibels, that's extremely loud. Chainsaw levels, a little bit louder, 110, a really powerful lawnmower, and going up to something that is painful, like fireworks. Just some interesting facts on this one, actually some scary facts to be honest. At 150 decibels, so off the scale, your eardrums could actually burst. We go a little bit louder, 200 decibels can rupture your lungs. 210 decibels and above, your brain will actually hemorrhage. And something amazing, and we were discussing this earlier, is that there was a very loud volcano, Krakatoa even volcano, and that was the loudest sound ever recorded. And just to explain how loud that was, People's eardrums were burst at 40 miles away. The sound travelled 3,500 miles, and it was the loudest sound ever recorded, and nothing's actually ever beaten that. It's absolutely unbelievable. So a little bit more detail into the temporary threshold shifts. The key word here is it's temporary. Your hearing is temporarily dulled directly after loud noise exposure. It can accompany with tinnitus, but it's temporary, so it will come back to your normal thresholds. Permanent threshold shifts. It's when you have continual temporary threshold shifts over weekly or daily, weekly, monthly, yearly exposures. Eventually, something's going to break. It's a bit like bashing your hand on the... You keep bashing your hand, you'll get a pain. If you bash your hand enough over a period of time, then eventually it will break. And that's the permanent part. It's very important that we're aware of your hearing level currently, what it is right at the moment, because you need to have some sort of reference to actually then understand where your threshold shift is. Other things that are associated with permanent threshold shifts are actually the tinnitus, the hyperacusis, and things like that. And if you look at it from an audiology point of view, we've got two graphs here. On the left-hand side, we've got an audiogram, and what that shows is the right and left ear, the left ear being the crosses and the right ear being the circles. Across the top, we have the frequency, so low pitched on the left-hand side and the high pitch on the right-hand side. If you look down the scale vertical, you have the decibel level. So you need to be as close to zero, close to the top line as possible. And you can quite clearly see at 4,000 hertz, that cross is around the 30 decibel mark. That's what you call a noise-induced or music-induced hearing loss. That is a permanent threshold shift. If it was a temporary threshold shift, then that would then recover over the next few days. But if it's permanent, it stays like that. If you look at the right-hand side graph, we have exposure over a period of years. So 1 year or less, you're on the top line. 3 to 9 years, you're getting a little bit of noise exposure, musically induced hearing element at the 4,000 hertz. 15 to 19 years, that curve drops a little bit, gets more significant. And up to 40 years, it becomes a little bit more dramatic. So people that have been playing their instruments for a long period of time have essentially used their ears more than someone who hasn't played it for a shorter period of time. Therefore, the wear and tear element will come in and the ears have naturally eroded down. This is an extremely interesting picture. On the left-hand side, we've got a normal hair cell structure. Now, if you remember from the video, the little hair cells are deep in the cochlea and they're all tonotopically organized, so different parts of the cochlea adhere to different frequencies. So the normal ones on the left, you can see how they're uniform in structure, different rows, they're looking very symmetrical, they're looking normal. You look on the right hand side, there's damage, they're sheared, it's looking sporadic, and it doesn't look very healthy, and the blood supply is reducing. A bit like your front door mat. It's got little hair fibers on there. The more you enter and exit the house and wipe your feet, the more that those little hair fibers are going to be worn down. Or if you think about a garden and grass, if you walk a path on some grass, those little grass will bend, but the next day they will be straight again. But if you continue to walk that path every single day, then eventually those grass sort of hair-like fibers will erode to the point where you can see a distinctive track. And that's what happens with your hair cells over a period of time. So we're going to just talk about the major hearing conditions and disorders affected by noise-induced hearing issues. We've probably all heard about this: tinnitus, very high-pitched, low-pitched, ringing sounds in one ear or both ears. You can have rumbles, you can have white noise, you can even have voices. Some people will find it more bothersome than anyone else, and some people find it less bothersome. You only really hear it sometimes when you're going to sleep because it's quiet. Busy traffic noise around you, the tinnitus will blend it into the background. I got tinnitus. I was 15 years old, went to a Motorhead concert, stood right by the speakers, and it was actually in the sound check that my ear started or was affected by the extremely loud feedback sound that you can sometimes hear when they're sound checking, or the strum of a guitar. And it's left me with a quite annoying shadow-like sound that follows me around in my left side. I've got to the point where I've actually accepted it. It's a part of my body. It's taken a lot of psychological perseverance to be able to understand what it is. And it has a negative impact on my life. However, now I am a hearing and balance specialist and audiologist. My therapy is helping other people who have tinnitus. A little bit selfish, but at least I can do good. Hyperacusis. Now, this is a sensitivity to sounds around you. It can happen with people with normal hearing or people with a hearing loss. It just makes things a little bit more sensitive and a little bit more discomfort. Diplacusis is when you hear a tone, a specific frequency in your hearing, but actually you're interpreting it slightly different. It can interfere with different perceptions of sound and impact you when you're playing a new piece in an orchestra, or if you go out to a concert, things will be perceived differently, and it's not very nice to get that. Misophonia. This is a hatred of sounds around you. We all know that fingernails on a blackboard make you wince. Someone scratching a dinner plate with some cutlery causes a reaction from most people. But even chewing, clicking your knuckles for other people to hear can just cause an irritation and actually can lead into anxiety. Somato sounds is sensitivity to sounds internally. So your stomach rumbling, your ears clicking. When you swallow, you make a certain noise which you can hear, and that can actually cause a bit of stress and anxiety. And one of the most difficult ones to overcome, because once you start hearing the internal noises, you'll never stop hearing it. It's a little bit like tinnitus. Once you start hearing a tinnitus sound, it's very hard not to focus on it. It's a bit like telling someone, don't think of a big elephant standing on a big beach ball. What do? You think of that. So if you get told by someone not to think about your hearing, not to hear the tinnitus, you automatically hear it. So in my opinion, you shouldn't be afraid of it. It's something that you don't want to have, obviously, but you need to protect yourself not to get it. But once it happens and you've been consulted audiologically, it's something that in time you learn to live with. Phonophobia. So it's anxiety of environmental sounds that you experience on a daily basis. Traffic, train, tube, sounds of the wind. It can cause you to feel anxious. You think your hearing is going to be damaged from it, and therefore some people will overuse hearing protection, even when walking down the street or around the home. That's really difficult to get weaned off. The day that you haven't got the hearing protection and the sounds around you are happening is quite a significant factor in that day, because you will be extremely anxious and really want to put your hands over your ears. So all of those medical problems for ears can result in a huge amount of stress and fatigue, whereas you could rehearse or perform private practice for an hour to 2 hours. If you have experienced anything like that, you will get auditory fatigue, which means that you could only tolerate that for about 20 minutes, therefore impacting on everything else you do that day. And if you're at a music conservatoire or a college and you're studying, it can have an impact on your studies. So it's important to understand, like an athlete understands their body and how a match or a training has an impact on their muscles, you must understand, as musical athletes, understand how it affects your ears. Okay, so we've got some shocking facts here. 61% of adult musicians aged 27 to 66 have some form of hearing loss. In the youth musicians aged 18 to 22, the rate is 22%. And in children musicians 8 to 12, 16% have some form of hearing difficulty or hearing issue. It's a little bit more difficult to understand that in a younger person because of their understanding and their perception of sound around them. There's quite a few studies going on, especially as a result now of the Royal Opera House claim into hearing and the effects of hearing loss and what is actually going on in our ears and how many people does it affect. I said earlier that some people can be exposed to the same sounds. Only one person has a tinnitus and the other person will be fine. Everyone is completely different. That's what makes us unique. But these studies are all concluding that a period of time exposed to music, noise or sound will have a negative effect on our ears. So what the doctor's saying here, it's quite easy to treat this cow by taking the bell off. It's easier to get the ringing out of that person's life or the cow's life. Prevention is always better than the cure. So we're going to look at how we're going to increase the ear health longevity and prevention strategies and solutions to avoid getting tinnitus or any of the other musically induced hearing disorders. First of all, we just talk about decibels. So you can listen to about 85 dB for about 8 hours. If you increase the decibel level by 3 decibels to 88, it will halve the exposure time to 4 hours. So it's exponential, 91 dB to 2 hours. Therefore, if you're in an environment where you can reduce the decibels heard by any of the musicians or artists by 3 decibel or dB, you can actually double your safe exposure time. So turning it around. The other thing is, and related back to my experience at the Motorhead concert, I was standing right by the speaker. If I was at the back of the hall, of the room, of the auditorium, then I will have a different decibel level hitting my eardrums. It's actually quieter. So protecting your hearing, a couple of tips that we're going to just introduce to you. It's important that orchestral directors or organisers of orchestras or anyone who's doing any recording, that there are scheduled breaks, quiet breaks in the rehearsal or in the recording session to allow ears to recover. Now that doesn't mean going on your phone, speaking to your friends or listening to some music. It means actually quiet, almost silence. Keeping noise levels down generally in life day to day, on the tube, it is very loud, so you've just got to keep your exposure levels down. Everyone really should own a pair of hearing protection, custom if possible, like we own a pair of sunglasses, and always keep it with you. You never know when you might need it. I certainly use them if I go out for a drink in a cocktail bar or in some restaurants, or even to the point where I know when there's going to be an applause at a theatre, because it is extremely loud, and I'll put them in. You can mark up the scores so you're prepared for sound peaks in the rehearsals. You could also practice on mute, going through the motions of playing the instrument, using dampeners or playing it without producing any sound, just to go through the motions in practice. A lot of orchestras are in tune with positioning of different musicians and different groups of instruments to give the best sound, but also protecting the performers. You can use screens, razors, you can put acoustic property material to sound absorb. So if you drive or ride a motorbike every single day and you also play the violin, then fine. There's no problem with driving a motorbike or riding a motorbike. However, you're going to be exposed to a different amount of sound. So your daily noise dosage will be a lot lower than the performer who's not got a noisy transport mode. But however, on the tube these days, it's so screechy and it's so loud. Even if you put a pair of over-ear headphones on, that is doing something to protect you in your when you're moving around London or around the UK. The other thing as well is if you put your window down above 60 mile an hour, the decibel levels are very, very loud. So you just be mindful of that, anyone in open top cars. So we've been talking about some protection. On the screen, we've got a pair of custom fit hearing protection. Every ear is unique, size, shape, ear canal volume. So it's important to have something that fits properly, securely and snug, that doesn't fall out, gives the appropriate acoustic properties. And on that picture, we've got some filters, the white little discs in the middle, and they are flat frequency attenuating filters. It allows sound to travel through without distorting the frequencies and allowing more natural sound perception from what you're hearing. Another part to the custom fit hearing protection is actually verifying the fit of them. You can just pick up some foam earplugs or some instant fits from Amazon or something like that, and you can put them in and it will work. However, if you're investing quite a lot of money into custom fit protection, we've got to understand what level is that protecting when it's in your ear. And we are coming up with a new way of verification, hearing testing people with and without protection, putting little microphones in the ear canal with the protection in and out to understand the acoustic properties of each individual's ear, the left and the right. And we'd also be performing leakage testing to understand that the product is fit for purpose. So we'll just talk about using hearing protection effectively. It's not always the bit that's educated, because sometimes people just receive it in the post and then the instruction manual doesn't do it justice. So understanding the right level of attenuation you need. You don't want to overprotect yourself or underprotect yourself, because you won't actually perform optimally. You'll either be damaging your hearing if it's underprotected, or if it's overprotected, you might be playing louder than everyone else and you can't regulate that. We talked about the flat attenuating filters, which is important for you to have the clarity of sound and also be able to enjoy your own instrument, but also enjoy playing as a part of the orchestra whilst keeping your ears as healthy as possible. And a good tip is actually putting your hearing protection, whatever it may be, custom or instant, in at least 5 to 10 minutes before any other sounds are performed, to stop that temporary threshold shift affecting the impact of the hearing protection. It's a little bit like sitting in the dark and then turning the lights on and being expected to look at a puzzle. It's very difficult. You've got to focus, you've got to acclimatize. And if you do that properly, you won't actually notice too much difference when the sound is played. It will sound more natural, and therefore you'll be able to hear people talking when it's quieter periods, but protecting when it's noisy periods. Everyone should carry a pair of hearing protection around with them, in a tin, in something on your keyring, in your instrument case. Just like we always are prepared for a sunny day. We have sunglasses and hats and sun cream. One of the most important things from my side as an audiologist is developing relationships with music students, with performers, with people who are involved in noise, so we can understand the needs of each individual and understanding and creating the best sound solution for each person. Everyone's instrument differs, the decibel levels differ, so we've got to take that into account. But having that direct communication and correspondence with an audiologist, knowing them by first name, having their email address, shooting them a quick email if you're any concerns about your ears. After all, professional athletes have professional physiotherapists. Why don't professional musicians have professional audiologists looking after them? Okay, so we're looking at a little revolution here. That's on the screen is a 3D laser ear scanner. That will take the resting geometric shape of each ear by scanning it with a light laser. It's almost like painting the ear with light. It will then create an image on the screen which is exactly your ear's resting potential and the shape, which we then 3D print and make custom hearing protection out of. The previous method is actually a little putty that's injected in the ear, it's set, it's cast, and then we can then make the hearing protection from that. There's a bit of errors that can happen there, and using light is extremely accurate. And this is what it creates. We'll keep that shape at Hearology on file for at least 5 years, and then you should be able to order protection, with the same ear impression shape. But after 5 years, your ears generally change shape slightly, and we would have to take a new impression. So anyone who's got hearing protection over 5 years ago, I definitely strongly urge you to go and get them refitted or remade, because you might think you're protected when you're not. So we're just going to recap a little bit how to achieve ear health longevity. It's being aware, professionals being aware of their own sound that they're receiving, or people who are employing musicians to make acoustic assessments and evaluations and provide hearing protection where necessary. Making sure that there's planned appointments for musicians to go and get their hearing tested, to have a chat with an audiologist. Even a good idea would be inviting an audiologist to a rehearsal, so you can have 5 or 10 minutes at the beginning to ask some questions or have a short presentation. Custom hearing protection is the preferred method. However, any protection is protecting your ear. It's just how well you want to hear the sounds around you. We really enjoy working with musicians to understand their needs and requirements. As audiologists, we see it from the scientific and the medical point of view, but musicians are hearing it from their point of view, live on the front line. So I'm nearly finished now. If anyone would like to type some questions into the box, we'll be able to answer a few of them. We have had a question already sent through, and we'll go through that in a minute. So if you just have a little think, anything personal to you, or alternatively, you can get in touch with us via email at hello@hearology.uk. So just to finish now, everyone, if you don't know about this, where have you been? But Laurel and Yanny, we're just going to play this clip, and to yourself, or maybe type in the box what you hear, Laurel or Yanny.
Laurel, 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 Laurel. Okay, well, I definitely heard Laurel. My partner at home definitely hears Yanny. It's split our household. It's probably split businesses, boardrooms, musician students, anyone who's actually attempted this. And yes, we can go into the scientifics of it. We can understand how the speaker is emitting the sound. I've heard a couple of little comments about if you hear Laurel, you're hearing more low frequency. If you hear Yanny, you're hearing better high frequency. The point is, everyone is different. You perceive sounds in a different way. Your brain decodes sound waves and vibrations into electrical stimuluses, and we just hear things in a different way. And all around the world, phonetics of language is all different. So our perception is different. So, if you hear Yanny or you hear Laurel, it's okay. Have the discussion though, because it's interesting. Okay, so just going to dwell on this a little bit, and I'll part with a couple of little comments. The sign of a professional musician is someone who looks after their ears as well as their instrument.
maintains the health of the most vital musical instrument, and understands the impact of an accumulation of sound over a period of a lifetime of performing. It would be very sad if you performed all your life, giving enjoyment to other people in the audience, and at the end of it, not being able to hear the very bits of music that gave other people that enjoyment. And you would never accept a job that at the end, your eyesight would be a quarter of what it was at the beginning. So never accept that for your ears. Some references. And if you haven't already guessed, we love ears. And so should you. Thank you. Okay, we've got a question here from Catherine, talking about hearing loss and hearing protection from 7 years ago. Had some earplugs made for rehearsing and sometimes teaching, which are supposed to filter sounds, but still able to hold a conversation. They're great when playing, but I can't hear normal speaking very well with them in, so they're not practical for rehearsing or teaching. Do you have any suggestions or recommendations as to where new ones I can get, or some better ones, and things might have improved since I had mine done? Okay, Catherine, well, 7 years, it's time for you to get your ears checked again, to understand if the hearing has got any worse, and to actually remake some hearing protection, because your ears change shape every 4, 5, 6 years. It varies a little bit. So if it was 7 years ago, I strongly urge you to either get in contact with us or find a provider to assess your hearing and understand what filters are required to put in the custom hearing protection, because 7 years ago they were a little bit different. Now they're more modern, they're more accurate, and they filter sound in a better way. Charissa. I have a very high-pitched, pretty loud voice. I've never had decibels measured, but I know other people say their ears ring when they're in the same room as me when I practice. Wow, your voice must be extremely loud. I know your ear mutes your own voice a bit, but is my voice damaging my hearing without me knowing? What a question. There's something called the acoustic reflex in the ear, which actually protects when you start shouting, and it will cause the eardrum to not pass on those harmful and dangerous vibrations of your own voice. To a point, we do have acoustic reflex testing. We're able to assess how well that's working. Let's just go back to the principle of exposure over a period of time. If this is for an hour and you're rehearsing a day, then that should be okay, depending. It'll be interesting to know what decibel level you reach, to be honest. But if it's an hour a day, that should be okay. But if you're doing it for long periods of time throughout the day, I would recommend people in the same space as you to wear hearing protection, because the principle of noise exposure is there. But for yourself, try and spread it out throughout the week. Probably wear some hearing protection. You might need to get used to that, but it's important. Maybe we could measure the decibel level of your voice. I haven't actually looked into that, and I'm sure some singers can really bellow some very loud sounds out. Good question. Can you recommend a reliable sound monitor, Catherine? We can do. We have people who are involved in that in the business, so we will get in touch with you, or if you'd like to get in touch with us afterwards. It's a little bit more of an answer than what I can give right now, but there are lots of different ones out there. They're varying in price. Get in touch with us and we'll be able to advise you. Okay, so we've got a question here from Mario, talking about quite a technical question there about decibel levels and how does it change in the proximity to sound source. So the further you are away, the better it is. Obviously, the sound level can actually reduce by half as you move away from the sound source. So it's very, very difficult in a rehearsal in an orchestra because you're quite tightly positioned. But yes, you can experience noise damage from a certain instrument. I think the piccolo is the loudest instrument in the orchestra. So if anyone's playing near that, I'd suggest you wear hearing protection, definitely, because that is quite acute. Okay, so we've got a question from Andrew here about clarify the duty of care aspect in respect to freelancers versus employees. So anyone who is employed should be, the welfare of your ears should be looked after by the employer. If you're a freelancer or a student and you're self-employed, then that is your obligation to protect yourself. If you want to get in touch with us afterwards, I've got a PDF document which you could have a good read of, which will give you a little bit more detail there. Okay, Catherine, hello again. Silicone earplugs at night time cause any problems? No, a lot of people do wear earplugs at night. I mean, the worst thing I've come across is people, especially in the last couple of months, sweating at night time, not cleaning the earplug, the sleep plug properly, not having a custom sleep plug, having the waxy ones that harbors bacteria. It's been hot, it's been moist, your ear is a dark environment, bacteria can grow. It's reducing sound, so it's serving a purpose. However, some people can, and I have in the past, become dependent on sleep plugs or hearing protection at night time because of noisy neighbours or road traffic. I would say go with caution, speak to an audiologist in person because your ear is completely different to everyone else, and we'll be able to then advise on it. Essentially, it's fine. They wouldn't sell them if it wasn't. However, custom protection that fits your ear precisely is the most comfortable. Can you offer any comfort or advice to Meniere's suffering musician, Stephen? So Meniere's is the most commonly misdiagnosed ear problem. It is a spectrum. Some people have a very mild episodic version of Meniere's, and some people have a quite an intense version of Meniere's. Like I say, it's a spectrum. So if you're suffering that as a musician, again, you need to be consulted by an audiologist face to face, because Meniere's can be quite debilitating, dizziness, and noises in the ears. So I'd actually recommend Stephen come and have a chat with us. We do have ENT and audiologists that specialise in this. Andrea, what would the recommended amount to spend on getting a good pair of ready earplugs? So sort of an instant fit, you're looking around £25 to £45, I believe. I'm not here going to rate hearing protection. I do have an opinion on all the different hearing protections that are out there, but we're certainly not going to sit here and rate or talk about ones that aren't working or ones that are working. But for instant, anywhere from 25 to 45. Custom, you're looking into the £100 mark, £150 mark. If you want to get it verified, you want to get a hearing test made, and slightly more. We are offering discounts to people from ISM, so we would be able to make it easier on the wallet. Oh, sounds like everyone heard Laurel. Well done. I don't know if there's a right answer or a wrong answer. Like I said, it's your own perception. So, Margaret, small practice rooms are probably the worst place to practice. I'm sorry to say that. I know that there's a space issue with most conservatoire rehearsal studios, but the sound is bouncing off all of the walls. It can be loud in there. I mean, flutes and piccolos are the loudest instrument in the orchestra. I probably would just advise, we were talking about this earlier and it's quite a good idea, go to a local park and play outside. the sound won't be as loud as if you are in a small rehearsal room. I'd always try and wear hearing protection when you're rehearsing, and often people around you, they would also need to wear the hearing protection. But if you want to get in touch afterwards, we can talk about precise decibel levels. Okay, so we're just going to wrap this up. A couple more questions. Oh, this is a great question. So Judith, brilliant. Talking about occlusion caused by wearing earplugs. So if anyone doesn't know what occlusion is, it's when you put your fingers in your ears and you can hear your own voice inside your head and you can't regulate the amount of sound you're speaking out, how loud it is. The occlusion effect can happen by wearing foam earplugs or anything going into the ear because you're reducing the acoustic volume in the ear. And it's difficult to overcome that. The best thing is wear a proper filtered hearing protection because some of the filters will regulate the airflow. Also, get used to it before you go to a big performance. If you've just bought a pair of custom hearing protection, you're about to play, the best performance in the Royal Opera House or whatever it is, and you're about to put them in, then it will cause you to have an occluded feeling in your ears. So if you could practice wearing it in rehearsal, in practice, at home, around the house, just to get used to what it sounds like with the protection in, you'll do much better. But it all depends on the filter. It all depends on the how far the earplug or the custom hearing protection goes into the ear canal. The longer it is, the fuller it is in there, the less occlusion we will have. Okay, time for one more questions. How do I find an audiologist who can provide this ear protection? I'm here. Hello. Come and get a chat with us. My name is Vincent Howard, Hearology. We have a great clinical audiological team at our London Bridge Clinic. We are about to open Euston in a couple of months. Come and have a chat with us, but we can discuss that further. It's better face-to-face. Have a look on our website, hearology.uk. And there is a big difference actually between NHS and private. With the NHS, they're treating problems. Privately, we're going to manage the problem. Very, very different. So we're going to follow up with other questions afterwards. Please email us, hello@hearology.uk, no problem. And like an athlete has a physio, a musical athlete will have an audiologist. And if you let Hearology be that for you, we'll be happy to help. Okay, thank you.